You know that feeling when something doesn't quite sit right, but you can't explain why? Like a tiny stone in your shoe. Not painful, just persistent. That was how it began with Dana's evening courses. My wife, Dana, told me she enrolled in a professional development series to advance her career. 3 nights a week, she'd leave just after dinner, dressed sharply, portfolio in hand, her silver watch gleaming against her wrist. The kids and I would watch her go from the living room window, me cradling Ellie in one arm, while Jamie waved with his chubby little hand. "Stay up for me," she'd say over her shoulder, smiling. "I'll be back before 10. And every time, she was. Except something didn't feel right. At first, I chalked it up to insecurity. I'd been laid off from my architectural firm 2 months earlier. The company downsized, and I was suddenly the expendable mid-level designer. So, yeah, maybe part of me felt a little inadequate. Dana was thriving. She'd recently landed a promotion in her corporate HR department, while I was the one doing school drop-offs and filling out job applications between laundry loads. Still, I tried to be supportive. She'd made sacrifices for my career in the past. Maybe this was her time to shine. But things started adding up strangely. Her class schedule was always vague. "It's a soft skills course, leadership, conflict resolution, that kind of thing," she'd said when I asked. When I requested details, what organization was running it, what certification she was earning, she'd brush me off. "Just something offered through work," she said one night, her eyes never leaving her phone. That's when I noticed the shift. Dana had always been attentive, perhaps not overly affectionate, but we had our rhythm. Now, there was this distance, a politeness, like she was performing a role instead of living a life. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband. I didn't want to become that guy, the one checking his wife's texts or questioning her every move. But when you spend days alone in a quiet house, your mind starts filling in the blanks. And when she left her course binder on the counter one night, navy blue with a gold embossed logo that simply read Thrive HR Institute, I couldn't resist. I Googled it. Nothing. No website. No listings. No articles. I even tried variations, searching for Thrive HR training, HR certification evening classes, anything I could think of. Still nothing. The next morning, after dropping Jamie at daycare and walking Ellie to preschool, I sat down with a steaming mug of black coffee and started calling around. First, I rang Dana's company, just the main switchboard, anonymously. I asked whether they had any partnerships with a Thrive HR Institute. The receptionist had never heard of it. I asked if Dana was enrolled in a certification program. After a pause, she told me, "Not that I'm aware of, sir. That might be a personal endeavor." That alone wouldn't have confirmed anything, but it cracked something open in me, a feeling of subtle panic, like standing at the edge of a dark stairwell and not knowing how deep it goes. So, I started digging. I watched her patterns. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. She'd leave at 6:30 p.m., return at 9:50. Never late. Always the same warm kiss on the cheek, the same soft perfume, the same story. Good class. We role-played some tricky conversations today. One Friday, I told her I had an interview across town and wouldn't be home for dinner. I didn't. I parked 2 blocks away and waited. At exactly 6:28, Dana came out in her sleek black coat and pulled away in the car. I followed at a distance, adrenaline humming in my ears. She drove west, away from downtown. Not toward the corporate learning center like she once claimed. Not toward any educational institution I knew of. She parked on a quiet residential street, one I didn't recognize, lined with large brick homes and old-growth trees. She stepped out, glanced around, and walked up to the side entrance of a house with a red door and no visible signage. I sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, watching the windows for lights, for shadows. I waited for an hour, maybe more, until I saw her emerge. She walked calmly, confidently, as if she belonged there. Back in the car, she checked her reflection in the rear view, applied a fresh coat of lipstick, and drove home. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed the scene on a loop. Dana, walking into a stranger's house, not a classroom. That wasn't a school. That was something else entirely. Over the weekend, I pretended to let it go. I played with the kids, mowed the lawn, made pancakes on Sunday. But by Monday, the curiosity had metastasized into obsession. I returned to that house just after she left for class. This time, I parked 2 houses down and waited. Lights were on inside. Around 7:15, I crept closer. There were no signs of a business, no banners or educational materials visible through the front windows. The place was too quiet. I crossed the street and ducked behind a hedge. From that angle, I could see through the window into what looked like a living room, dimly lit, heavy curtains, a bottle of wine on the table, 2 glasses, and there she was, Dana, laughing, tossing her head back, with a man I'd never seen before. They weren't touching, not yet, but they sat close. Their knees almost brushed. Her hand lifted to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, the same nervous gesture she'd used when we first started dating. I staggered back, heart in my throat. This was no class. I didn't go home. I couldn't. I drove aimlessly for hours, city lights blurring past my windshield. How long had this been going on? Who was he? Was this love? Lust? Revenge? Or something else entirely? Back home, Dana was already asleep when I entered the house. I stood there in the doorway to our bedroom, watching her breathe steadily, her arm curled beneath her cheek like a child. I felt cold. Not angry. Not even heartbroken. Just hollow. Tuesday, I called an old friend, Mitch, who ran a tech consulting firm. We weren't especially close, but I remembered him once mentioning he could pull text logs with the right tools. I asked for help, no questions. He agreed. By Thursday, I had a copy of Dana's text messages. That's when the illusion truly shattered. There were hundreds. Late-night messages, daytime messages, codes, jokes, intimate thoughts, pictures, not explicit, but flirtatious. Familiar. In one message, time-stamped just 2 nights ago, I'll say I'm at class again. He won't suspect anything. He never does. I sat alone in our kitchen that night, staring at the screen, my knuckles white around a glass of untouched whiskey. I had all the proof I needed. And yet, I didn't confront her. Not yet. Because if she could lie that easily, so smoothly, what else was she hiding? It was no longer about the affair. It was about everything else I didn't know. I started keeping a notebook. It sat in my nightstand drawer, disguised beneath an old copy of The Design of Everyday Things, the kind of book Dana always teased me for rereading. Inside the notebook were times, places, notes about her patterns. A sketch of the red-doored house. License plate numbers from cars parked out front. It read like the diary of a paranoid man. But paranoia was beginning to look a lot like insight. She didn't know. At least, not yet. Every morning she kissed me like nothing had changed. Made coffee. Talked about work. Tucked notes into Jamie's lunchbox like a perfect suburban mom. But at night, she disappeared into that polished lie of hers, into her so-called evening courses, where I now knew she was studying nothing except how to make a fool of me. What unsettled me most was her calm. It wasn't guilt that flashed across her face. It was peace. She was at ease in our home. In our bed. I kept looking for cracks in her performance. A nervous twitch, a misplaced item, some hint that her world was coming apart at the seams. But there was nothing. Only me. I was the one falling apart. I spent long hours re-watching the surveillance footage I'd captured. It was grainy, the lighting poor, but the moments were there. Dana, entering the red-doored house. Dana, brushing her hair in the hallway mirror, adjusting her blouse before slipping off her coat. Dana, laughing, her face illuminated from within. A light I hadn't seen in years. She never smiled like that with me. Once maybe, when we were young and hungry for each other. When the smallest things, movie nights, morning coffee, whispered plans for the future, were electric. Now, those things lived in a box labeled routine, buried under chore lists and mortgage payments. I'd been so sure that we were solid. Steady. But steady was just another word for stagnant, wasn't it? And maybe she'd been drowning in it. On Wednesday morning, she asked if I could pick up the dry cleaning. She was running late for class. Her tone was soft, polite, not apologetic, not rushed, just detached. Of course, I said. I smiled. She smiled back. But something inside me broke a little. Later that afternoon, I drove out to the red-doored house. Not to confront anyone. Not yet. I needed to know who owned it. The house sat on a corner lot, its front garden meticulously maintained. 2 tulip trees, hydrangeas, a wrought iron bench. There was something theatrical about it, a curated charm, as if the house was performing too. Like Dana, I parked 3 houses down, slipped on sunglasses, and walked past slowly. A brass number plate, 41, Knollwood Avenue. I typed it into the county property records app on my phone. The house belonged to a man named Marcus Thorne. The name didn't register, but the search brought up his LinkedIn profile. Director of Learning and Development at a boutique consulting firm downtown. Age 42. Recently divorced. Amateur saxophonist, according to his bio. I hated him immediately. I found a photo, professional headshot, clean-shaven, dark-rimmed glasses. Confident. Polished. The kind of man who called himself emotionally intelligent during first dates. Dana always had a weakness for thinkers. Dreamers. The kind of men who quoted articles from The Atlantic at brunch. I scrolled further. They'd met through work. 2 months ago, Marcus had given a seminar at Dana's company on conflict mediation and high-performance teams. She'd mentioned it once, vaguely, in passing, saying it was actually more interesting than it sounds. I hadn't thought much of it, but that was where it started. I called Mitch again, asked him to run a scan on Marcus's name across Dana's texts and emails from the cloned phone. Within the hour, he sent me an encrypted file, hundreds of messages. It wasn't just an affair. It was a relationship. They talked about everything. Inside jokes, shared frustrations, philosophical musings, what books they were reading, what their parents were like, what scared them most about getting older. The part that gutted me wasn't the sexting, though there was plenty of that. It was the emotional intimacy. She told him things she never told me. About her doubts, her dreams, her guilt over how numb she'd become in our marriage. She'd written, "He's a good man, but I feel invisible around him." Invisible. That word haunted me. That night, I made sure I looked her in the eye as we sat on the couch together, watching some comedy she liked. I laughed when she laughed. I offered her a foot rub. She smiled, leaning into me like old times. I wondered if Marcus had touched her that way, if he kissed her temples when she was tired, or rubbed circles into her back when she couldn't sleep. At 6:30 p.m. The next evening, she left again. "See you around 10?" I asked. "Same as always," she said, grabbing her coat. And I watched her walk out the door like a stranger leaving my home. Only this time, I followed again. But I didn't just park nearby. I parked one street over. I waited. And after 20 minutes, I walked straight up to that red door. I didn't knock. I waited on the side porch, under the eaves, watching the silhouettes move inside. 2 figures. Dana. Marcus. She leaned against the kitchen island. He poured wine. They talked. She laughed. Her shoulders relaxed. He reached forward and touched her face with the back of his hand. A soft, intimate stroke. I took a picture. Then another. Then one more. My hands were cold. My chest tight. But my mind, crystal clear. I wasn't just watching an affair. I was witnessing the dismantling of my life. In 4K detail. I walked back to the car in silence, like a man returning from war. The next morning, I emailed myself the photos. Backed them up to a cloud folder. Printed 3 copies. Labeled them. Truth. But still, I said nothing. Because a storm was building inside me. And storms don't speak. They strike. I was done watching. I was done collecting evidence. The time for silence was over. The time for revenge had begun. There's a moment when grief curdles into purpose. When heartbreak hardens into strategy. That moment found me in the garage, lights off, hands covered in dust as I rummaged through the boxes we hadn't opened since we moved in 6 years ago. I found what I needed at the bottom of a crate labeled Dana College. Her old photo albums, forgotten knickknacks, and a USB drive, silver and slim, tucked in an envelope that once held a handwritten card from someone named Melissa, a name I vaguely remembered from her university days. Back then, we weren't married yet. I'd helped Dana move into her first post-grad apartment. I remember she wore a hoodie 2 sizes too big and laughed the whole time as we struggled with a broken futon frame. She kissed me under flickering porch light that night and said, "We make a good team." I held that memory in my hand, and it felt counterfeit now. But the USB wasn't what I was really after. Beneath it, I found her old Nikon DSLR. Heavy, reliable, with a tripod that hadn't seen daylight in years. I dusted it off and tested it. Still worked like a charm. By 3 a.m., I had it angled perfectly through the small vent in our attic, trained on the street where Dana parked her car outside Marcus Thorne's house. The telephoto lens let me capture everything from a safe distance. Arrival, entrance, departure. But I wasn't interested in more grainy surveillance footage. I wanted faces, expressions. I wanted proof that couldn't be argued away. Dana had stopped hiding. She was too comfortable now, too assured. That arrogance, that entitlement, would be her undoing. By the end of the week, I had over 40 high-resolution photographs. Dana laughing on Marcus's porch, sipping from a mug in a soft robe I'd never seen before. Dana barefoot, twirling her hair. Marcus, leaning in close, hands ghosting her waist. There was one shot, Thursday, 8:52 p.m., where their silhouettes danced in the living room window. No music, just the intimacy of two people who'd stopped pretending they had anything to hide. That image burned into me. That was the night I decided to set the plan in motion. I reached out to Mitch again, but this time I needed more than digital help. I wanted to know everything. Who Marcus was seeing besides Dana. Where he worked. What skeletons lined his closet. Mitch had a contact, a guy who specialized in executive-level digital forensics. I didn't ask for names. Just paid in crypto and waited. The report came back in 3 days. Marcus Thorne was recently divorced. Yes, but not peacefully. His ex-wife, Claire, had filed on grounds of emotional abuse and financial infidelity. He was under investigation for misreporting consulting expenses at his firm, an HR nightmare, ironically, and he had a sealed warning from a former intern who had accused him of inappropriate behavior. None of it had gone public. Yet, I printed the report, added it to a growing folder I labeled Event Night. I wasn't just going to confront Dana. I was going to demolish her life, and his, in one surgically planned detonation. But first, I needed her to feel safe. Untouchable. I needed her to believe she'd gotten away with it. So, I did what felt like the hardest thing I'd ever done. I apologized. One morning over breakfast, after Jamie spilled cereal on the floor and Ellie cried over a mismatched sock, I turned to Dana with a sigh and said, "I've been distant. I'm sorry." She blinked at me, toast halfway to her mouth. Where did that come from? I don't know. Just, I've been stressed. Job stuff. Maybe I projected it onto you. Her expression softened. You've been under a lot of pressure. I get it. We should take a weekend for us, I added. No kids. Just reconnect. She hesitated, then smiled. That would be nice. It was all lies. But lies had become the air we breathed. That weekend getaway never happened. Instead, I used it as a cover to set things up. On Saturday, while she was at class, I met with a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, her company's top competitors' counsel. I brought the file on Marcus, the texts, the photos, the proof of professional misconduct, and explained, very calmly, how his ongoing affair with a married woman from their competitor's HR department could be viewed as collusion, or at the very least, a severe breach of ethical conduct. I didn't ask them to take action. I just left the file. They would know what to do. Later that night, while Dana showered, I checked her hidden phone again. More messages. Marcus, I wish you didn't have to go home. Dana, soon. Maybe not for much longer. Soon. What did that mean? Was she planning to leave? Had she rehearsed the speech already? I felt the ground shifting under me. She was ahead of schedule. I couldn't let her beat me to it. The next morning, I made pancakes, smiled, played board games with the kids, pretended nothing had changed, while inside, I was timing everything like a bomb technician. Event night was now set. Friday, 7 p.m. She thought I was taking the kids to my sister's cabin for the weekend, guy bonding time. I called it. She didn't question it. In fact, she seemed relieved. The moment she left for class, I swung into motion. I drove to Marcus's street, parked 2 blocks down, and waited. At 7:12 p.m., she arrived. Same coat, same rhythm. I gave it 10 minutes. Then I stepped out into the night and walked up the path. The red door loomed ahead. A soft glow framed the edges. My heart pounded. My fingers tingled. I raised my hand and knocked. 3 times. Firm. Even. The kind of knock that makes people straighten their backs. A pause. Footsteps. The door opened. Dana stood there, wine glass in hand. And for a heartbeat, she looked at me like she didn't recognize me. Like I wasn't real. Her mouth opened. But before she could speak, Marcus appeared behind her, wearing nothing but a shirt and jeans, barefoot, holding another glass. Hey, babe, who is? Then he saw me. Everything froze. The look on Dana's face? Terror. But it was Marcus who spoke first. Can we help you? I didn't answer. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Read this, I said, handing it to Dana. She took it with trembling fingers. Inside, a single photo. Her, laughing, On this porch, labeled Lesson 1, Betrayal has a curriculum. I turned and walked away without a word. But as I reached the street, I heard the beginning of her sob. And just as I opened my car door, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Mitch. One line. Check your email. It's worse than we thought. The drive home was silent, just the dull hum of the tires against the road and the faint clicking of my blinker as I turned into our neighborhood, a grid of tidy lawns and soft porch lights, where the worst crime might be an overgrown hedge or a forgotten recycling bin. It felt surreal to return to that kind of quiet after what I'd just done. And yet, somehow, I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. I parked in the driveway and just sat there for a moment, engine off, fingers still curled around the steering wheel. Inside the house, the kids were with my sister, tucked into sleeping bags and munching popcorn on her living room floor. They knew nothing of the storm brewing behind their parents' closed doors. I'd lied to them too, but that lie, at least, was protective. It was 9:43 p.m. when I finally checked my email. The subject line from Mitch read, "Got him. Read ASAP." I opened it slowly, breathing through my nose like I used to do before presenting architectural models to impossible clients. Inside, a single PDF. Marcus Thorne, sleazebag-in-chief, had been careless. Mitch's contact had scraped his encrypted cloud backups, which included a series of deleted conversations and, most disturbingly, a set of audio files. I downloaded them. Hit play. It was Dana's voice first. Clear, relaxed, laughing. Then Marcus's, lower and slower. A practice charm. They weren't just having an affair, they were plotting. Discussing exit plans. Timing. Finances. Custody. Jamie's old enough to decide. Dana said in one clip, her voice eerily calm. But Ellie, she's still small. If I handle the narrative carefully, he won't stand a chance. Marcus replied with a chuckle. That's the benefit of being the primary parent. Judges love that. Primary parent. That phrase hit harder than any betrayal. While I built our home, financially, literally, piece by piece, Dana had positioned herself quietly as the martyr, the caregiver. The one always present, even when she wasn't emotionally there. She was constructing an image, laying the groundwork. She wasn't just cheating. She was rewriting the story. And in her version, I was the absentee husband, the obstacle, the uninvolved father, a shadow easily brushed aside. That's when my grief turned to something darker. This wasn't just about a marriage anymore. This was war. I spent the next 3 days in total silence with her. Dana returned late that night, pretending nothing had happened, and I let her pretend. I said nothing. I didn't ask how her class went. I didn't mention the envelope I'd handed her, or the look in her eyes when she opened it. Instead, I watched. I observed how she smiled a little tighter around me now, how her eyes flicked to my hands whenever I moved, as if anticipating confrontation. She was waiting for the explosion, bracing for the fight. But I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to plead. I was going to let her dig her own grave. On Tuesday, I met again with the lawyers, this time my lawyers. I presented everything. The surveillance footage, the photos, the transcripts, the audio. They didn't just nod, they leaned forward. You have enough to file for sole custody, my lawyer, Elaine, said plainly. Especially with this level of manipulation. What about the house? I asked. If you want it, it's yours. She'd be lucky to walk away with her car. I nodded. And then I handed over one last item. A sealed manila envelope addressed to Marcus Thorne's HR department. Elaine raised an eyebrow. Pressuring her employer? Just ensuring all parties understand the cost of playing in other people's homes. The letter detailed the affair, backed with time-stamped evidence, framed not as vengeance, but as a concerned husband bringing attention to inappropriate relations between a married employee and a contractor known for predatory behavior. I didn't lie. I just told the truth in the most damaging way possible. The next step was timing. Everything had to land together. The legal filing, the exposure, the full collapse. I scheduled it all for the following Monday. And I had one more idea. Something theatrical. Something final. On Saturday, I pretended we were hosting a dinner. A simple gathering, just family. Dana seemed confused but grateful. You're cooking? She asked, eyeing me cautiously. I shrugged. Thought it might be nice. We could use something normal. I invited her parents, my sister and brother-in-law, a couple of close mutual friends. Even Marcus. Through a dummy email. He wouldn't come, of course. but I wanted Dana to wonder if he might. I spent the day preparing lamb roast, red wine, candles, the whole illusion of domestic perfection. And when the guests arrived, I greeted them with a practiced smile. Dana played along beautifully, too beautifully. She made polite jokes, refreshed drinks. Her performance was Oscar-worthy, but I watched her glance at the door every few minutes. Waiting, dreading. The tension coiled inside her like a spring. At 8:07, my sister asked to say a toast. I stood up instead. I actually have something I want to share first. Dana's eyes shot to mine. I held up my wine glass. Tonight is special, I said, because it marks the end of a chapter. Everyone smiled, nodded, but also the beginning of a new one. I gestured to the television, already cued to a video file. I thought a little slideshow might be fun. Dana froze. The room dimmed, and the screen lit up. At first, it looked harmless. Pictures of our kids, vacations, laughing moments. Then the images shifted. Dana, on Marcus's porch. Dana, in his kitchen. Dana, in his arms. A murmur spread through the room. Gasps. A clatter of glass. Dana stood up, hand over her mouth. "Stop it," she whispered. I didn't. The next clip played. Her voice. Clear. Cold. "If I handle the narrative carefully, he won't stand a chance." That was when her father stood up and walked out. My sister followed. Dana didn't cry. She just looked at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. Like I had become someone else. And maybe I had. The guests dispersed in awkward silence. Dana stood in the doorway, trembling. I approached her slowly, my voice barely above a whisper. "You built this lie," I said. All I did was shine a light on it. She opened her mouth, to explain, to apologize, to bargain, but I held up a hand. "It's already done." I handed her a stack of documents. "Your lawyer will receive the rest Monday morning." Then I walked past her, out the front door. The night air was cold on my face, but I felt nothing, just a numb kind of peace. But as I got into the car, my phone buzzed again. A number I didn't recognize. I answered. A voice I hadn't heard before, low, female. "I'm Claire Thorne," she said. "Marcus's ex-wife. I saw the photos you sent to his employer." I hesitated. "Okay, I think we should talk," she said. "Because there's something you don't know about your wife." My pulse ticked up. "What do you mean?" She took a breath. She wasn't Marcus's first affair. Claire Thorne's voice was sharp, not with rage, but something quieter. Controlled. Measured. The way someone sounds after they've been burned too many times to let it show anymore. "I'm sorry to come at you like this," she said. "But when I saw what you did to Marcus, I knew I had to reach out." I was parked in a grocery store lot, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly the leather creaked. "How did you find me?" I asked. "You left just enough in the files. Your watermark was on one of the attachments. I'm in marketing. These things leave fingerprints." "Of course. What is it you think I don't know?" I asked slowly. She was silent for a moment. Then, "Marcus has a pattern. He targets women at corporate trainings, especially ones in HR, especially ones who have something to lose." I said nothing. The hum of traffic filled the silence. "He didn't seduce your wife, Mr. Howard," she continued. "He recruited her, the same way he did with Lauren 2 years ago, and Krista before that. He sells them a fantasy, independence, reinvention, escape. Then he uses their insider access to infiltrate their companies." "What are you saying?" I asked, though a part of me already knew. "He's been stealing proprietary frameworks, training materials, onboarding processes, retention algorithms, and leaking them to competitors. For a price." My breath caught. "You're telling me Dana was helping him spy on her own company?" At first, maybe she didn't know. Maybe she thought she was just sharing ideas with a lover. But she knew eventually. And she kept going. The weight of it crashed over me like a second betrayal. Not just infidelity. Not just emotional manipulation. But corruption. "She's named in a sealed arbitration document," Claire added. "Alongside Marcus. It never went to trial. The company paid out quietly. She was still working there under NDA. But if this blows up again..." She didn't need to finish the sentence. I stared through the windshield, my own reflection barely visible in the darkened glass. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because I wanted to hate you," she said. "But watching what you did, you weren't cruel. You were precise. And because there's one more thing." A pause. "She and Marcus weren't alone." "What?" "There's a third man. And your wife's been seeing him for longer than she was with Marcus." I found messages when I pulled the backup off Marcus's old laptop. Do you want the name? Every muscle in my body tensed. Yes, I whispered. It's Richard Halpern. I blinked. Wait, Rich? Rich from her office? Your wife wasn't just cheating, Claire said gently. She was building exits. Options. She was never going to choose Marcus. Or you. I hung up the phone in silence. Then I drove. I didn't even know where I was going until I got there. The parking garage near Dana's office. It was late, the building nearly empty. But her car was there. She hadn't come home. And that meant she was still trying to salvage what she thought she could. I called her. No answer. I left no message. Instead, I walked up the steps to the 6th floor of the garage and waited in the shadows. 10 minutes later, she emerged from the building, heels clicking, hair pulled tight, phone pressed to her ear. I'm telling you, it was just a misunderstanding, she was saying. He's blowing it out of proportion. We'll manage the optics. She stopped short when she saw me. The phone fell away from her cheek. Ethan, she said. What are you? Rich Halpern, I said. She froze. I saw the recognition hit her like a bullet. Her mouth opened, closed. Then the lies began. That was, he and I. It's not what you think. You were seeing him before Marcus, I said. While pretending we were fine. While pretending this marriage still meant something. Tears welled in her eyes. But I felt nothing. I was past fury. Past grief. I was standing on the other side of betrayal, where clarity lived. You said I made you feel invisible, I said quietly. But maybe you were always just disappearing yourself. Please, she whispered. Please don't take the kids from me. I'm not taking them, I replied. You gave them away the moment you turned our family into a backdrop for your rehearsed reinventions. She sank against the wall, but I didn't stay to comfort her. That was someone else's role now. Someone I no longer recognized. The months that followed unfolded like a slow exhale. The legal proceedings went through. The court granted me primary custody. Dana fought, briefly. Then she backed down. Perhaps she knew the battle would expose more than she could afford. She resigned quietly from her job 2 weeks after Marcus's HR department received the files. Marcus himself? He disappeared from the industry entirely. Blacklisted. Word spread fast in the consulting world, and faster still when Claire leaked the evidence to select reporters under an alias. The scandal broke just before a planned speaking engagement. He was dropped from every major panel within 48 hours. Dana moved in with a friend out of state. She sees the kids on weekends. They ask about her less than I expected. Maybe they sensed what I hadn't. Maybe children always do. Some nights, I still lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how long I missed it. How many quiet betrayals had gone unnoticed while I focused on providing, building, maintaining. I used to believe that marriages die loudly, through shouting, door slams, cruel words. But I learned something else. Sometimes, they die in silence. In white lies. In phantom classes and fake calendars. In the gentle closing of a door as your wife heads off to an imaginary lecture on conflict resolution. Now, I live differently. I don't check phones. I don't look over my shoulder. I don't wait for apologies. I walk forward. Every day, I pack the kids' lunches. I drop them at school. I pick them up. I sit through dance recitals and science fairs and endless drawings of volcanoes and stick-figure dinosaurs. And every now and then, when the house is finally still, I open that notebook, the one where I track Dana's lies, and I tear out a page. Not to forget, but to release, piece by piece, until one day, the notebook will be empty, and I'll be free.